Hi again everyone. In the last video we installed TMF on Ubuntu Lucid from scratch. This time we will actually use it to open a trace taken with the LTTng kernel tracer. Now here, for the sake of completeness, I will install LTTng on this machine so that I can take an example trace, and then we will open it in TMF. Note that if you only want to analyze a trace that comes from another machine, for example, this step will not be required. So here I am with the exact same system I had at the end of the first video. The only change is that I increased the resolution a bit because Eclipse likes to have a lot of space to play with. Now I'm gonna install LTTng from the PPA. Of course, packages for other distributions will be awesome to have, but for now, if you're on another distro, you will have to compile your kernel by hand. Instructions to do so are on the lttng.org website. Okay, this time I'll use a terminal for a change. First I have to make sure the PPA is enabled. You can use this command to do it. So it's apt-add repository and then the address of the PPA. But if you remember, I added it during the first video, so I don't need to redo it here. The next step is to install the LTTng package. Okay, once that is done, now I need to reboot into the new kernel that I just installed. So simply reboot here. Don't worry, it shouldn't take long. KVM boots really fast. So I just make sure that on grub I select the LTTng kernel. We get some funny graphical artifacts, but we get there. Okay, so now I'm in the LTTng kernel, so I can start tracing. The first thing to do is to arm the different markers. So I can use this command, ltt arm all. Okay, now I'm ready to trace. So let's start a new trace. We'll give it the very original name of trace1. So this command here tells LTTng to create and start a new trace that I will save in this path. And I will call my trace trace1. So here we go. Now I'm tracing, so I can start Firefox, start another program. Let it connect to Google. Okay, now I'm happy. I will stop my trace. So I tell it to destroy, which means stop, and commit to disk the entirety of trace1. Here it is. Okay, so now let's look at that trace using TMF. So I open Eclipse, the nifty little shortcut I added in the first video. And now, if you remember, since I've installed the source version of the packages, I will need to run those packages as an Eclipse application, and I will use the second nested Eclipse to display my trace. Okay, so here we are in TMF. It looks a little bit better with a better resolution. So first I will create a project. I will be really original with the names here, so I'll call it project 1. Now TMF works with experiments, and an experiment is a collection of traces. I could have maybe 10 different traces that either come all from the same machine or from different machines, and I might want to analyze just one or just a couple of them at the same time. Those different setups would be called experiments. Here it's quite straightforward. We only have one trace, but we'll go through the method anyway. So I create my experiment 2, the original, and I need also to import a trace in the TMF view. So I click on Browse, and I go to the folder where my trace was saved. So if you remember, it was in TMP trace 1. So yeah, I have all the little files here. This is what I'm looking for. I check this box here to tell it to import this trace, and I click Finish. Now my trace is available for loading here. So in my experiment, I will select a trace. Now here I would have all the traces that I have here. In this case, I only have one, so I want to display it. Click Finish. Now the experiment has a trace loaded. If I want to display the experiment, I double click on this line here. And here it is. I have different views. Here is the events view that has the series of events that were in the trace. I can look at the histogram. It tells me roughly where was the density of events was happening. So what are the interesting points in the trace. I can look at statistics. Well, it's still being computed right now. The trace isn't completely loaded. Then you have a statistics view. You have the resource view, which is a bit similar to the control flow, except it's per resource, or CPU, RRQs, see where stuff happened. If I want to kind of know what was happening in my trace, if you remember, I opened and closed Firefox. I'll try to find it in the trace somewhere. Sure is a lot of stuff. Okay, so 2 hours later, no, just kidding, didn't take that much time, but I finally found it. The thing is, the processes I have here represent what processes were active at that point in the trace where I am. And now my histogram view wasn't big enough. Okay, the screen is still too small for Eclipse. So this is the complete trace. That's shown here with the density of events, and in the window here I have what is being shown right now. Like this width here is represents the same width that I have here, and I see on the total trace here I'm looking at a very small part of it. So I can zoom out. I can click this little magnifying glass here to zoom out, and then I can go look at other points in the trace. Let's zoom out a bit more. Now if I go look at here, I have seem to have more events at that point. What happened? We'll go see. Now I should have my Firefox processes. There they are. Can move a bit forward. So the different colors here represent different state the processes were in. So in pink, it's simply waiting, and when it's gray like this, it means the process was dead. So if we remember this, so this point in the trace represents the moment when I actually close my Firefox. So we see it spawned many different processes, and this one here was quite active towards the end. It was doing system calls, waiting for the CPU and stuff like that. So we have this information here. We're able to go back and look at it. Now, of course, it's not extremely interesting here because I'm not looking for anything in particular, but if, like, say you have an application that's instrumented, or you're debugging your program, if you want to have a test run, you run it, you trace it, and you look at what it was doing, it can be quite a powerful tool. Okay, so that pretty much ends the little introduction. I hope you've enjoyed it. TMF is of course being developed actively. Some features that will be coming up, for example, is being able to control tracing from within TMF, so you don't have to use LTTctl like I did earlier. There's also integration with UST, the user space tracers, so you could look at the different traces, one coming from an instrumented application and another one coming from the kernel. There will also be a remote trace control and streaming using RSC, the Remote System Explorer view, and a bunch of other really interesting stuff. So thanks again for watching, see you next time, and until then, happy tracing!